You spend your whole life building a family, only to wonder, did anyone even notice? My name's Carolyn Maynard. I'm 74 years old, and some days I still wake up believing that love, real love, comes back around if you just wait long enough. But lately, I've started wondering if maybe I've waited too long. Mornings in Millersburg start with silence. Out here, you can hear the birds before you hear the cars, and sometimes I like to sit by the window with my tea and pretend nothing's changed, that Wesley still lives down the hall, that he'll come out of his room barefoot, hair a mess, asking if I made pancakes. But he's 47 now, and I haven't made him breakfast in decades. Still, old habits don't fade easy, especially not for mothers. My house, the one I've lived in for over 40 years, has seen it all. Scraped knees, birthday balloons, late-night fevers. I built this place with my own hands. Well, mine and Tom's. He passed when Wesley was 14. Cancer doesn't care how much you still need someone. After that, it was just me and Wesley. I raised that boy on homemade bread and double shifts at the diner. When tuition time came, I picked up extra cleaning jobs just to get him through business school. No one ever helped me. No one ever had to. I was proud of that. And now Wesley owns a luxury property development firm with vacation homes on Crystal Lake and a glassy SUV that probably costs more than my house is worth. But I never asked for anything. I never needed a thing, except maybe time. A cup of coffee now and then. A hug. I don't want diamonds. I want to be remembered. This Friday is my birthday. I don't like to make a fuss, but I had a feeling this year might be different. Wesley had hinted at something 2 weeks ago when he came by to drop off some forms he needed me to sign. He said, "Don't make any plans next Friday, Mom. I've got something up my sleeve." He said it with that little grin he used to flash when he was hiding Christmas presents in his closet. I held on to that grin like it was a promise. So all week, I've been preparing. I pulled out my navy blue dress, the one I wore to his graduation. It still fits, though it hangs looser on me now. I ironed it gently and left it on the hanger by the door. I even baked his favorite cake, carrot with walnut cream cheese frosting, just in case he stopped by early. It's silly, maybe. But when you've been alone as long as I have, even the smallest gestures feel like gold. They're reminders that you still matter to someone. I went into town on Wednesday, bought new lipstick, soft rose, and stopped by the florist. The girl behind the counter said, "A party, huh?" I nodded. "Kind of," I said, "a family thing." I didn't tell her I wasn't invited yet, but I believed I would be. My son wouldn't forget me. Not this year. I guess that's the strange thing about mothers. We love first, we forgive fast, and we hope until the very last minute. Even when the voice in your heart whispers, "Don't expect too much this time," you still put the cake in the oven just in case. It's funny, though. When I was younger, I used to hear those dramatic revenge story plots on TV and think, how could people be so cold to their own family? Now I see how easy it is to disappear from someone's life. Not with anger, but with quiet neglect. Wesley hasn't called again. It's Thursday evening and there's no sign of anything. No text, no email. I told myself maybe he's planning a surprise. Maybe he's been busy. Or maybe Celine, his wife, wanted to handle the details herself. She never liked me much, but I always tried to stay out of their way. I even bought her a scarf last Christmas. She never said thank you. But that's all right. It's not about the thank yous. It's about being remembered at all. So here I am, sitting on the porch, watching the sun bleed orange across the fields. The cake is cooling on the counter. The dress still hangs by the door. My hair's freshly washed. And my heart, well, it's hanging on. Because mothers don't give up, even when they probably should. And part of me still believes that when Friday comes, I'll get that call, that smile, that hug. The kind that says, "Of course I didn't forget, Mom. I never could." But sometimes life writes a different ending than the one you imagined, and some chapters start with silence. Friday morning started with sun and silence. I set the table anyway. 2 plates, one for me and one for whoever might stop by. I even folded the napkins the way Wesley liked when he was little, cross-folded, not rolled. He used to say it felt fancier that way, like we were eating at a real restaurant. It was almost noon when the phone finally rang. The screen lit up. Wesley. My heart jumped before I could stop it. I wiped my hands on my apron and answered, trying to sound like I hadn't been waiting. "Hi, sweetheart," I said lightly. "Hey, Mom," he replied. His voice was chipper, almost too cheerful. "How are you doing?" "I'm good," I said, pacing slowly near the table. "Was just thinking about you." "Oh," he said, then cleared his throat. "Yeah, about tonight." My grip on the phone tightened. "Yes?" I tried not to let the hope slip into my voice. Listen, I hate to say this, but dinner's off. Celine's not feeling great, caught some stomach bug or something. Doctor says she needs rest for the weekend." "Oh," I said, just that, like the sound had dropped out of me. "I'm sorry to hear that. Is there anything I can do?" No, he rushed. "She's just tired. We've got medicine, soup, the whole thing, but I wanted to let you know so you didn't dress up or anything." "Oh, well, that's thoughtful." He paused. Maybe he heard something in my voice. "We'll plan something soon, Mom, promise. You know how life gets." "Yes," I said, forcing a smile that no one could see. "Life does get busy." He exhaled, relieved. "Okay then, I'll call you in a few days." Click. Just like that, it was over. The cake was still on the counter, the dress still hanging, the plates still waiting, the napkins, cross-folded, suddenly looked foolish, like a stage set for a scene that would never happen. I stood in my quiet kitchen, staring at the phone. I couldn't move, not right away. It wasn't just about the dinner. It was how easy it was for him to cancel it, how practiced he sounded. Like it wasn't a change of plans, but something that had been decided long ago. He didn't even ask what I'd planned to wear. That afternoon, I walked into town, not because I needed anything, but because I needed to breathe. I passed the park where I used to push Wesley on the swings, the church where he sang Amazing Grace in 2nd grade, the diner where I worked night shifts for 3 years to afford his textbooks. And I couldn't stop wondering, when did I become optional? At the market, I ran into Doris Simmons, an old friend from the garden club. She was arranging lilies by the register when she spotted me. "Carolyn," she smiled, wiping her hands on her apron. "You all ready for the big night?" I blinked. What night? Wesley's thing at the lake house. I heard from Margot, whose sister helps out with the catering. It's his mother-in-law's birthday, right? Sounds like a big shindig. I froze. "I thought they canceled," I said slowly. "Celine was sick." Doris raised her brows. "Really? Margot just saw her this morning, picking up fresh salmon. Looked fine to me." My throat dried. I nodded politely, then walked out, leaving the groceries behind. Back home, I didn't cry. I just sat in my rocking chair with the sun sliding across the floor and stared at the wall. That's the kind of sadness you don't cry about. It's too old for tears. It just sits with you like an old friend you wish had never shown up. You know, sometimes I wonder if you've ever been quietly left out of something you were supposed to belong to. What did it feel like? Leave a word in the comments. Just one. You never know. Someone else might feel seen because of it. That evening, I made myself tea. I didn't bother reheating dinner. The carrot cake sat untouched. Too sweet for a night like this. I found the form Wesley had asked me to sign last week. Something about consolidating paperwork for future planning. I'd signed without reading it too closely. After all, he's my son. But that night, I read it. It wasn't just a document. It was a limited power of attorney, one that gave him the right to access financial accounts on her behalf should need arise. My name, my information, my signature, my trust, and my son's signature right beside mine. I set the paper down, hands suddenly cold. That's when it hit me. Not only had I been left out of the celebration, but I had been quietly used to help fund it. My name was on that dinner. My money, my name, my absence. He didn't just forget me. He erased me. And worse, he benefited from doing it. That was the night something changed inside me. Not rage, not revenge, but something quieter and far more dangerous. Clarity. The next morning, I didn't open the curtains. I didn't make tea. I didn't put on lipstick. I didn't even take the carrot cake out of the fridge. I just sat there in the stillness of my kitchen and felt it, the weight of being erased. It's one thing to be forgotten. It's another to be deliberately removed. Wesley didn't just cancel a dinner. He built a celebration on my absence. He stood in the light of my name, used my signature, dipped into my trust, and toasted someone else while I sat in the dark. I picked up the phone and called Thelma, my neighbor 2 doors down. She's known Wesley since he was a boy. I figured maybe she'd heard something. Anything. When she answered, she sounded distracted. "Hey, Carolyn, can we make this quick? I've got errands this morning." "Sure," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "Just wondering, did you hear anything about a party at the lake house last night?" She paused. "Oh, you mean Wesley's event?" "Yes. It was lovely, I heard." She hesitated. "I wasn't invited. I think it was mostly family." "Family, right." I thanked her and hung up. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I got dressed in the navy dress I'd ironed 3 days ago, tied my gray hair up neat, and called a cab. The driver, a young man with a tattoo on his neck, raised an eyebrow when I gave him the address. "Crystal Pines? Swanky spot. You got a reservation?" "No," I said. "I just want to see something for myself." The lake house was nestled behind wrought iron gates, sitting smug on a slope of manicured lawn. I asked the driver to stop 2 houses down and let me walk the rest of the way. There were cars everywhere. Wesley's black SUV, Celine's silver hybrid, even a few out-of-state plates. So much for everyone's under the weather. I stood across the street, partially shielded by a row of maple trees, and looked toward the house. Music floated through the evening air, laughter, clinking glasses. A woman's voice rose over the crowd, toasting, cheering followed. Then I saw them, through the window, a big table set for 12, covered in white linen, sparkling wine glasses, candles, and there, at the center of it all, a printed sign that said, "With love and thanks to Carolyn Maynard." My name, in gold script, right next to a champagne fountain I surely hadn't paid for. I stood frozen, heart pounding in my ears. It took a few moments to register what I was seeing. They hadn't removed me entirely. They had used me. I wasn't at the table, but my name was. My identity had been repurposed as a tax write-off, a public gesture, a placeholder. I watched Wesley stand and raise his glass, that slick smile on his face. "To our families," he said, "to the ones who built us." Everyone clapped. Someone yelled, "To Carolyn!" I didn't feel honored. I felt buried. They didn't want me there. They just wanted what I could offer without being present. When I got home, I stood in the hallway with my coat still on. Then I walked to the kitchen and took the carrot cake out of the fridge. I cut a thick slice, put it on a plate, and sat at the table alone. It tasted bitter, even the walnuts. I stared at the walls, the faded photographs, the dented sugar canister Wesley had made in pottery class when he was 8. I stared and asked the question I was too afraid to ask out loud. When did my son stop seeing me as his mother and start seeing me as an asset? I didn't sleep that night. I opened every drawer, every cabinet, pulled out old financial documents, wills, bank statements, and slowly a picture began to form. Wesley had been preparing for this for a while. 6 months ago, he had me sign a revised property agreement for insurance purposes. 3 months ago, he introduced me to a financial advisor who insisted I list Wesley as an emergency beneficiary. 2 weeks ago, he had me sign the power of attorney. It was all leading to this. He didn't just want my name on the paperwork. He wanted my silence. He wanted to build a life on the bones of my sacrifice, while keeping me tucked away, out of sight, out of mind. No more. That night, I sat on the porch with a blanket over my shoulders and the night wind brushing against my face. I looked up at the stars, quiet, eternal, unbothered by the mess we make on Earth, and I made a decision. No rage, no phone call, no confrontation, just clarity. I was not going to beg for a seat at a table I had paid to build. From now on, if they wanted to drink champagne in my name, they'd do it without access to my name, my funds, or my forgiveness. And if they asked where I'd gone, let them wonder. I woke up before the sun, not because I had plans, not because I had somewhere to be. I just couldn't sleep. The room was quiet, except for the soft hum of the refrigerator in the next room. My bones ached, but not in the way that asks for medicine. It was deeper than that, something you feel when the world shifts under your feet and nothing looks quite the same anymore. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the sliver of light beginning to peek through the blinds. My hands were resting on my lap, still empty. That was the moment it truly landed on me. No one was coming, no son with coffee, no knock on the door, no voice saying, "Mom, I'm sorry." And for the first time in my life, I didn't need them to. I wasn't angry anymore. Not because it didn't hurt, but because I had nothing left to give that kind of pain. It had drained me, slowly, year by year, until there was only space left. And maybe space wasn't so bad. I poured myself a cup of tea. No sugar this time, just the bitterness. It suited the morning. Then I sat at the kitchen table with the same form I'd read the night before, Wesley's power of attorney document, my signature next to his, a quiet betrayal written in ink. I flipped it over and looked at the fine print again. How easy it had been for him to wrap control around my name, not with force, but with familiarity, with, "Trust me, Mom." That's the thing about betrayal. It doesn't wear a mask. It wears the face you love most. But as I sat there tracing the letters with my finger, something inside me shifted. I'd spent my entire life giving time, money, meals, years. I gave Wesley my back when he needed carrying, my hands when he needed cleaning, my name when he needed funding. And still, he looked at me like I was in the way. That morning, I didn't cry. I made a list. I pulled out a yellow legal pad from the drawer and titled it, "What's Mine? House Deed, Still Under My Name. Bank Account, Joint Account Closed 2 years ago. Good. Car Title, Paid Off. Insurance Policies, Wesley listed as Emergency Contact, Needs to Change. Will, Last Updated 2015, Needs Revision. Trust, Silent Beneficiary Clauses, Suspicious. Call Lawyer." It wasn't just about protecting my money. It was about reclaiming my name. That name he'd used on dinner invitations, tax paperwork, catering contracts. He could keep the celebration. I would take back the meaning. Around noon, I took a walk. The wind was cool, but not cruel. I passed the old stone church on Elm, the one where Tom and I got married in 1971. The doors were closed, but the bench out front was still there, weathered and warm in the sun. I sat down and let the quiet settle in my chest. Behind my stillness, there was movement, not in the world, but in me. I wasn't who I was 3 days ago, and I wouldn't go back. Later that evening, I pulled out a small fireproof lockbox from my closet, the one where I kept the important things: wedding certificate, birth certificate, my father's military flag. I added 2 more items: a copy of the signed power of attorney, a photo of me and Wesley, taken at his college graduation. He was beaming. I was exhausted. I stared at that photo for a long time. In it, I saw a mother who believed love was enough, that if she just held on, he'd come back around, that sacrifices would one day be remembered, not rewritten. But now I knew better. I folded the photo gently and placed it at the bottom of the box. Then I shut it tight and slid it under the bed. Let the past stay there. The next morning, I called my attorney. I told her I wanted to revise my will and revoke all power of attorney forms. She paused on the phone. "Is everything all right, Carolyn?" "Yes," I said quietly. "It is now." I used to think that letting go meant failure, but maybe letting go is how you save yourself. Maybe the bravest thing isn't holding on. Maybe it's walking away without a sound. The Monday after everything fell apart, I walked into First County Bank with my chin held high. It had been years since I'd stepped into that building for anything other than depositing checks. But that day, I asked for an appointment with a manager. Not a teller, not a representative, a manager. The young woman behind the desk blinked at me. "Do you have an account with us, ma'am?" "Yes," I said, "and I'd like to make sure it stays mine." We sat in a quiet office with tinted windows. I handed over a folder, neatly labeled, everything in order. "I'd like to remove all secondary access to my financial accounts," I told her, voice steady, "effective immediately." She frowned. "Even your son?" "Especially him." There was a moment of hesitation in her eyes. Maybe she thought I was being paranoid. Maybe she thought I was just another lonely, old woman, upset after a family disagreement. I didn't care. Some things don't need explanation. By the end of the week, I'd closed the old checking account, reopened a new one in my name only, changed the beneficiary information on my life insurance, removed Wesley's name from my emergency contacts, updated my will, this time with the help of a lawyer who asked me real questions and didn't blink when I said, "No, I don't want to leave anything to my son." Next, I called a realtor. The house was old, full of memories, full of ghosts, but it was also mine. And now, for the first time, I wanted to use it for myself. She came on a Thursday morning with her clipboard and pleasant smile. "Looking to downsize?" she asked gently. "No," I said. "I'm looking to right-size." That weekend, I began cleaning out closets. I found Wesley's baby shoes, his high school yearbooks, a dried corsage from prom night. Every little piece of him still lived in that house, tucked away in corners, buried in boxes, like tiny landmines that could explode on contact. I didn't throw them away. I packed them neatly, tied each box with string, labeled them clearly to be donated or not. But I did throw out the guest towels, the ones Celine refused to use, and the china she once said was too dated for modern dinner parties. It felt good, not vindictive, not bitter, just clean. I moved into a smaller place 2 weeks later. A one-bedroom cottage on the edge of town, quiet, walkable, bathed in afternoon light. The walls were bare, but not cold. I brought only what I needed, my teapot, a framed photo of Tom from our honeymoon, a worn copy of Little Women with my notes in the margins. I didn't tell Wesley I'd moved. I didn't leave a forwarding address. Let him wonder. The first Sunday in the new place, I woke to birdsong. I made toast, watered the small ficus I'd bought from the farmer's market. Then I sat on my porch, wrapped in a shawl, and felt light. No more waiting for calls that wouldn't come. No more pretending I didn't notice the silence. No more watching someone else's mother get the seat I once held. I wasn't erased anymore. I had rewritten the page. You know, there's this idea folks have, that once you reach a certain age, you're just surviving, just existing, like your story is already written and you're just flipping through the last few pages. But I don't believe that. Not anymore. Because what they forget is this. Older women don't disappear. We step aside so we can see clearly. We go quiet so we can hear ourselves think again. We let go so we can carry only what matters. And maybe that's not flashy, but it's freedom. I started volunteering at the library, just a few hours a week, helping with the senior book club, shelving returns, recommending stories to folks who don't want romance, just something real. The librarian, a young woman named Amelia, asked if I'd ever thought about writing something of my own. I laughed at first, but later that night I took out a notebook and wrote the first sentence. This is not a revenge story. This is a story of remembering. And maybe that's exactly what I needed to do. Not punish, not plead, just remember who I am and live like I matter, because I do. 3 months passed. Fall came early that year, bringing golden leaves and a softness in the air that made everything feel a little more bearable. In the new house, I slept deeper, breathed easier. I began humming again while washing dishes. Somehow, without even noticing, I had started living again. It was a Tuesday when the first envelope came. No return address, just my name, handwritten in a slanted rush. I opened it carefully. Inside was a simple card, no Hallmark branding, no gold leaf, just 5 words scribbled across the front. We didn't mean to forget. No signature, no explanation. But I recognized the handwriting. Wesley. There were no flowers, no apology, not even a request to talk, just a line that didn't ask forgiveness, just enough to suggest he finally noticed the empty seat. I didn't write back. Some silences are earned. Instead, I tucked the card into a drawer beneath the scissors, tape, and envelopes I rarely use. I wasn't angry, but I was done offering grace before it was asked for. 2 weeks later, I ran into Doris Simmons outside the bakery. She leaned in close like she had gossip that tasted sweeter than the cinnamon rolls in her hand. "You hear about the lake house?" I blinked. "No." "Wesley listed it. Put it on the market last week." "Really?" She nodded. "Word is, his investors backed out. Too much debt. Celine's mother isn't talking to them either. Something about being misled over some estate paperwork." I didn't react. I just looked up at the changing trees, their red and gold leaves spinning in the wind. "They say he tried to get a bridge loan," Doris added, "but he doesn't have any assets under his own name. Most of it was in yours." I smiled just a little. "Well, that's unfortunate." Later that night, as I watered the small planter box on my porch, I heard the soft chirp of a car door down the block. Footsteps followed, slow, hesitant. Then came the voice. "Mom?" I turned, already knowing who it was. Wesley stood at the end of my walkway, hands in his pockets, looking 10 years older than the last time I saw him. The confident man who used to sweep into a room like a gust of wind now looked like he'd walked straight through one and had nothing left in his hands. "I didn't know you moved," he said quietly. "I didn't think you'd notice," I replied. He took a breath. "I've been trying to call. I changed my number." Silence stretched between us. Finally, he said, "I messed up. I let things get too far." I looked at him, not with hate, not with longing, just stillness. "I never wanted to hurt you." "I know," I said. "You just wanted what I had, without what came with it." He didn't argue. He looked down, then back up. "Is there anything I can do to fix it?" I thought about that for a long time. Then I said, "No, but there's something you can do for yourself." "What?" "Live a life that doesn't require forgetting the people who built it." He nodded, and then he left. No big gesture, no tears, just silence. And that was enough. That evening, I sat at my little table sipping tea, looking out into the dusk. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel smug. I felt something better, untouched. He had come back, not to take, but because he realized something. And I didn't need to open the door to be seen. Sometimes the quietest presence has the loudest impact. You know, when someone hurts you in silence, the world rarely sees it. But when you walk away quietly, that's when they start to hear the echo of what they've lost. If you've ever chosen to disappear from someone's life, not to punish them, but to protect your peace, how did it feel the first time they noticed your absence? Leave a word in the comments. You never know who might read it and feel a little less invisible tonight. Because this story, it's not about revenge, it's about return, not of the person, but of the self. And that, my dear, is the real ending. I didn't think I'd ever hear from him again. After Wesley showed up that evening, hollow-eyed and quiet, I figured that was the last gasp of a man coming to terms with what he'd lost. And I thought, good. Let him sit in the silence for once. But 2 weeks later, a package arrived. Not flowers, not an apology letter, just a small cardboard box with my name written in Sharpie, a little too hard, like someone angry at the pen. Inside, a leather-bound book, Wesley's baby book, the same one I thought I'd packed away or donated. Tucked into the front cover was a note. "I found this, thought it should be with you." No salutation, no mom, no love, Wesley, just that. I sat with the book in my lap for a long time. The corners were worn, the binding creased from decades of being opened and closed by tired hands. On the first page was a photo of me at 26, holding him, hair windblown, face soft, eyes hopeful. I didn't cry, but I remembered. All the nights I stayed up holding him through colic, The peanut butter sandwiches I cut into little stars. The Halloween costumes I sewed by hand even when money was tight. And suddenly, the distance between us wasn't just emotional, it was time. Time had carved a canyon, and maybe I wasn't trying to cross it anymore. Maybe I was learning how to live on the other side. The next few weeks moved slowly. I picked up a shift at the library on Wednesdays. I started going to a watercolor class on Saturdays. I even said yes when a widow from the neighborhood invited me to a garden tour. People were still themselves, kind, polite, curious, but I was no longer introduced as Wesley's mom. Now I was just Carolyn, and I liked it that way. One Thursday afternoon, as I was folding laundry, the phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize, but something told me to answer. "Mrs. Maynard?" a young woman's voice said. "Yes?" "My name's Ashley. I work for Silver Oak Nursing Advisors. Your name was listed on a file for a Mrs. Phyllis Caldwell?" Celine's mother. I blinked. "I'm sorry?" "She's listed you as her secondary contact for medical decisions. You're not aware?" "No," I said slowly. "I haven't spoken to her in months." "Well, she had a fall. Nothing life-threatening, but she asked for you. Not Wesley, not Celine. You." I sat down, towel in my lap. "I'll come," I said quietly. I didn't go because I owed her anything. I went because I remembered what it felt like to lie in a hospital bed, hoping someone would show up. And I remembered what it felt like when no one did. Phyllis was smaller than I remembered. Her fire was dimmed, her hair thinner, but her eyes were alert when I walked in. "You came," she said, voice raspy. "You asked." She looked away for a moment, then back. "I didn't know who else would." That silence between us said more than either of us could have put into words. We were two women, once pitted against each other by our children's choices. Now reduced to truths neither of them could face. "They're in trouble, you know," she said. "I figured. They used your name too many times." I nodded. "And now they're hoping we'll clean it up." She looked at me, almost pleading. "What are you going to do?" I adjusted the blanket at her feet and stood. "I already did it. I left." That night, I sat on my porch and watched the wind blow through the leaves. It wasn't joy I felt, or peace. It was something else. Detachment. Not cold, not cruel, just distant. Like when you realize you're not part of the problem anymore, and you're finally okay with that. I've come to believe that sometimes the only way to be truly seen is to step far enough away that they have to squint to remember you. And if they never do, well, maybe it's not your loss. It had been nearly 5 months since the dinner I wasn't invited to. 5 months since I'd taken my name back, my space, my silence. And I had learned something in that time. When you stop chasing after people, they often circle back. Not with open arms, but with calculations. It started with a voicemail, not from Wesley, not from Celine, from their attorney. "Hi, Mrs. Maynard. This is Brian Keller. I represent your son and his wife in a matter regarding joint ownership of a private property trust. They're hoping you'd be open to a conversation about restructuring some terms. Please call me back at your convenience." I didn't. 3 days later, I got a formal letter in the mail, certified, thick. It was filled with legalese I barely understood, but the message was clear. They needed something. More specifically, access to a trust I'd once created for Wesley's future, tied to land his father and I bought before he was even born. I drove out to the edge of town that afternoon, past the old post office, past the mill, past the bakery that still made biscuits the way Tom liked them. The land was still there, quiet, open, undeveloped, ours. Well, mine now. And that, I realized, was the problem. The next morning, my phone rang again. This time it was Wesley. He didn't even pretend to ask how I was. "Mom, look, we're trying to get a refinance in place to avoid losing the lake house. It's tied up in a few assets, and your name is still, well, on a couple of them." I waited. He cleared his throat. "I know things haven't been easy between us, but if we can just sign a quick consent form, just your signature, then we can take care of the rest. It's not like we're asking for money." My voice stayed even. You don't want my money, just my name. There was silence on the line. Come on, he said. You built all this for me. Don't you want to see it continue? That was the moment it hit me. He still thought all of this was his birthright, that my sacrifices were his foundation, something he could build over, rewrite, and reuse. But I wasn't scaffolding anymore. I was solid ground. No, I said simply. Excuse me? I said no, Wesley. I'm not signing anything. You're really going to let us lose everything? No, I said. You already did. And I hung up. That afternoon, I baked a peach cobbler. I hadn't baked in months, maybe a year. But the rhythm of peeling, slicing, sprinkling cinnamon, it calmed me. While it baked, I stood by the window and looked out at the small garden I'd planted. The rosemary was coming in strong. The tomatoes looked proud. Funny how even the smallest things grow better when no one's shouting at them to hurry. Around sunset, there was a knock at my door. I didn't answer. Another knock. Then silence. I waited. A rustle. Something slid under the door. Later, I picked it up. A handwritten note. Please, just think about it. You could save us with one signature. And beneath that, scribbled in smaller letters, I'm sorry for everything. But even now, even then, it wasn't for me. It was for what I represented. It was for what I could give. And I was done giving to people who only noticed my worth when their world started burning. They weren't coming back for the woman. They were coming back for the bridge. But I'd already taken it down. That night, I slept without dreams. No nightmares. No tossing. Just breath. Just peace. And in the morning, I made tea with fresh lemon and went on with my day. We often talk about forgiveness like it's a gift we give someone else. But sometimes, the real gift is not giving them another chance to ask. Sometimes the strongest thing you can say is no, and say it with a smile. By early December, I thought they would have given up. I hadn't spoken to Wesley in weeks. I hadn't answered any calls. I didn't reply to the notes, the emails, or the polite messages from mutual acquaintances trying to play peacekeeper. But people like Wesley don't know how to let go of something they once had control over, especially when they're losing everything else. It started small. I stopped by the post office to pick up a package, and the clerk, a woman I've known for years, leaned in and said, "Your son was here last week asking if you'd moved again." I told him I wouldn't say. I thanked her, went home. 2 days later, I caught sight of his car, parked 2 blocks down, windows tinted, engine off, watching, not approaching, just watching. That same week, a package was left at my door, no return label. Inside, a bottle of my favorite lavender lotion, a book of poems I once read aloud when Wesley was 12, and a note. I know I don't deserve it, but maybe this can be a start. It would have meant something, years ago. Now, it just felt like trying to replant a dead tree in frozen soil. A week before Christmas, I received an invitation, thick envelope, gold lining. You are warmly invited to the Wesley and Celine Caldwell holiday dinner. Underneath, in small print, a private evening of reconciliation, family, and new beginnings. My name was written in blue ink, carefully. The irony didn't escape me. After uninviting me to dinner months ago, now they were hosting a family reconciliation evening, and I was supposed to smile and show up like nothing ever happened. I placed the invitation under my mug of tea. It made a decent coaster. The phone rang later that night. I let it go to voicemail. Wesley's voice cracked just a little. "Mom, I know we messed up, but I can't lose everything. I need this loan to go through. Just show up. It'll mean a lot to the investors to see you're still part of the picture." There it was. Not love, not apology, just leverage. I sat quietly in my chair, watching the lights on the small tree I'd decorated alone this year. There was no pain anymore. Not even sadness, just clarity. I realized something then. Wesley wasn't trying to rebuild a relationship. He was trying to reclaim an image, one where I stood behind him, smiling, silent, supportive. But I wasn't that woman anymore. And honestly, I don't think I ever was. Christmas Eve came. I made myself a simple dinner: roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, and a slice of apple pie from the diner. No expectations, no decorations, no noise, just peace. And when I looked out the window around 8 p.m., I saw headlights slowly pass by. They didn't stop, they just kept going, like something finally settled. Sometimes, when people realize they can't control you anymore, they panic. They offer gifts, attention, apologies, but it's not about you. It's about restoring their comfort. And when they realize you're not playing your old part anymore, they don't see you as free. They see you as a threat. That's why letting go takes courage. Because the moment you reclaim yourself, the world you once carried doesn't know what to do with your silence. Have you ever had someone try to come back, not out of love, but out of need? What did you do? If you feel like sharing, leave a word in the comments that captures your reaction. Clear. Gone. Enough. You never know who might need to see it. That night, I tore up the invitation and tossed it in the fireplace, and I slept better than I had all month. The last time I saw Wesley in person, it wasn't planned. I was leaving the grocery store, just picking up bread, eggs, and a few oranges, when I saw him parked near the curb. He didn't see me right away. He was looking down at his phone, shoulders hunched like a boy waiting for detention to be over. Part of me wanted to keep walking, but some weight in me said, no, this is the time. So I walked over. Quiet. Steady. He looked up and startled a bit when he saw me. "Mom," he said, his voice small. I nodded. "Wesley." He stood there awkwardly, like he didn't know what to do with his hands. "I've been meaning to talk to you." "I figured." He hesitated. "The dinner didn't go well. People asked why you weren't there." "That must have been hard to explain." He blinked. "Yeah." Then he said it. The words he hadn't managed in months. "I'm sorry." I looked at him for a long time, and I believed that maybe he meant it. But it came too late. "I'm not angry anymore," I told him. "But I'm also not coming back." His face dropped. "I'm trying. I know you are. But you're trying to fix your life, Wesley, not what you did to mine." He shifted his weight. "I didn't know it would hurt you that much." And there it was, that one sentence that told me everything. He still didn't get it. It wasn't about the dinner. It wasn't about the house, or the trust, or the silence. It was about all the years I'd poured myself into a life he thought he could cancel, like a meeting. I sighed, not from exhaustion, but from peace. "You don't need to explain anything to me," I said, "but I don't owe you anything either." He asked if we could talk again. I told him gently, "No, Wesley, I think we're done." And I meant it, not out of spite, but out of finality. I walked away, groceries in hand. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't emotional, but it was over. That night, I did something I'd put off for too long. I opened the old fireproof box under my bed. Inside were photos, documents, keepsakes, pieces of a life I'd built and shared and given too freely. I sorted through them one by one. The birth certificate I'd kept for Wesley, I folded it, tucked it behind the insurance documents, and moved it to a locked drawer. The emergency contact card that had his name listed, I updated it, removed him, wrote in Amelia, the librarian who brought me soup last winter when I had the flu. Then I opened my email and unsubscribed from the family group thread Celine had set up years ago. It was mostly filled with vacation photos I was never invited to join. And finally, I went into my phone and blocked Wesley's number. Not because I hated him, but because he no longer had the right to interrupt my peace. Some people will say I gave up on my own child, but they never saw the version of me I had to kill to keep peace with him. They didn't see me ignored, used, reduced. They didn't see me deleted. So no, I didn't give up on him. I just stopped giving him the power to write my ending. The next morning, I sat by the window with my tea. Outside, the frost had melted off the grass. The rosemary in the pot was hanging on. A little bruised by the cold, but still green. Still alive. Like me. You know, there comes a moment, quiet, private, when you realize you no longer need their explanation. Not because they finally said sorry, but because you finally believe that your pain was real. You don't need a witness, or a fix, or a second chance. You just need to let go. And letting go isn't loud. It's a locked drawer, a blocked number, a soft breath when the phone doesn't ring anymore, and you're okay with it. Have you ever made peace with walking away, even when the other person never understood why you had to? Leave one word in the comments. For someone else, that word might be the nudge they need to finally shut a door too. That afternoon, I walked into the garden and picked the last winter rose. It had bloomed late, quiet, unexpected. Just like me. I didn't expect to feel joy again, peace maybe, quiet, routine. But joy? That was a word I hadn't used in a long time. It crept back in slowly, through small, ordinary things, like the way the sunlight hit the hardwood floors in the kitchen around 8:15 every morning, or the first sprout in my little raised garden bed, parsley, I think, or the laugh I let out, loud and unfiltered, when Amelia told a ridiculous joke about dating apps and retired librarians. That one surprised me most. Not the joke, but the laugh. It had been years since I laughed like that. Not the polite kind, not the I'm fine kind, the kind that lifts you without your permission, the kind that reminds you, oh, I'm still here. I started painting again. Nothing fancy, just watercolors on small squares of paper, flowers, fruit. One little bluebird I couldn't quite get right but loved anyway. I hung them by the window with clothespins and string. My neighbors called it my porch gallery. I didn't do it for them. But it was nice to be seen for something I chose. One Thursday morning, I found a flyer at the library. Local artists wanted, community market booths available. I almost tossed it. But something in me said, try. So I signed up. A table, just $10. I brought 20 cards, my little paintings, a small framed sign, Carolyn's Quiet Things. And people came. They asked questions. They smiled. One woman picked up a painting of a lemon and said, "This looks like hope." And for the first time in years, I didn't downplay it. I didn't say, "Oh, it's just a hobby." I smiled and said, "Thank you." Because it did. It looked like hope to me, too. I didn't tell Wesley about the market. I don't think I ever will. There are parts of me now that are no longer available for family history to claim. They belong to me. And honestly, they always should have. I replaced the framed family portrait in the hallway with a watercolor I painted of my house. Not out of spite, out of truth. Because this is where I live now. And it finally feels like home. One Sunday, I sat with Amelia on the back porch, both of us wrapped in old quilts, watching the light fade. She looked over and said, "You seem lighter." I nodded. "I feel it." She didn't press. She didn't ask what happened. Just sat with me, silent and steady. And maybe that's all I ever needed. Not someone to fix it, but someone to sit with me in the after. You see, when people talk about starting over, they imagine fireworks, huge changes, brave decisions. But sometimes it's none of that. Sometimes starting over looks like saying no without guilt, laughing without explaining why, making dinner for one and lighting a candle anyway, painting a lemon and letting someone else call it hope. It looks like living again without waiting for permission. And the strange part is, no one claps, no one announces you've made it. There's no movie soundtrack. Just breath, just light, just you. Finally, tone, you. If you're reading this and you've been rebuilding something, quietly, privately, without applause, know this, that's still a victory. Maybe the most powerful kind. What's something small you did for yourself recently? Just because it brought you peace? Write it below. Not to impress anyone. Just to say, I'm still here. You never know who needs that reminder too. That evening, I watered the garden, then sat with a warm cup of chamomile on the steps. The bluebird came back, landed on the railing, and for once, I didn't try to paint it. I just watched. Quiet, full, alive. Snow had fallen overnight. By morning, the world outside my cottage window was quiet and white, a blank canvas that felt just right. I woke before dawn again, though by now it didn't feel unusual. I slid on my slippered feet, drew back the curtain, and watched the snowflakes settle on my rosemary bush. Even the cold looked gentle. I made tea, peppermint tonight, then wrapped myself in my favorite shawl and stepped onto the little front stoop. The steam rose from my mug, swirling in the crisp air. I let my shoulders drop. I didn't have anywhere I had to be, because I was finally home. After breakfast, I drove into town to the Willow Creek Community Center. They'd asked me to read to the kids for their winter program, something I'd volunteered for ever since I moved here. Inside, the foyer smelled of pine garlands and gingerbread. The children, bundled up in colorful scarves and mittens, greeted me by name. "Grandma Carolyn!" A 3-year-old squealed, racing across the floor with arms outstretched. I caught her and spun her gently. There's my sunshine. Her laughter reminded me of someone else's, once upon a time. Someone who never learned how to offer joy without taking. But this little one didn't care. She only knew I was safe and needed. In the library corner, I read The Snowy Day, my voice soft but clear. Halfway through, I paused and looked at their rapt faces. This was the part I loved most, that small breath of wonder when the first snowflake falls on Peter's tongue. It wasn't about me. It wasn't about my past. It was their moment to discover magic. When I finished, the children clapped. I collected my coat and coat hook card. The kids signed it with cute thumbprints and glitter paint, and headed home with my heart a little fuller. At midday, I warmed up leftover shepherd's pie, then pulled out my watercolor set. I painted a scene of the community center, a gentle doorway lit by fairy lights. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to. There's a freedom in creating something just for yourself. No commissions, no expectations, just pure, quiet expression. My neighbor Doris stopped by with a thermos of soup. "Thought you might like something savory," she said, handing it over. I smiled. "You always know." We sat side by side on my porch, sipping and watching the snow swirl. No need for small talk. It was enough to share the silence. That afternoon, I received a card in the mail. No return address, just my name in Celine's neat cursive. "Carolyn, please join us for Christmas Eve service at the church on Pine Street. We'd be honored to have you. Love, Celine." I held it in my hands for a long time. Then I tucked it into my notebook, among sketches and recipes, rather than my coat pocket. I wasn't angry, never angry, just aware that I didn't need an invitation to find my own peace. Evening fell and I lit a single candle in the window. My cottage glowed like a beacon for anyone who needed warmth. Not for Wesley, not for anyone who once called me only when they needed something. I brewed a mug of hot cider and sat at the window, watching the quiet street. Across the road, the community center's lights blinked off. A lone car drifted by, then was gone. In that emptiness, I found blessing. You know, people often say your story only ends when the last page is turned, but I've come to believe that true endings are written in the spaces between, in the moments you choose not to look back, in the invitations you choose not to accept, in the silences you guard as treasures. I wrote those thoughts in my journal later. This is my epilogue, not a farewell to love or family, just a nod to who I was, who I've become, and who I will be. I carry the lessons, but I no longer carry the weight. In my silence, I found my voice. When I closed the book, I felt whole. Before bed, I left the porch light on, just in case someone needed to know a light still stayed on for them, someone who, like me, might one day choose their own path over any invitation. And then I went inside, turned off the lamp, and let the hush of winter settle around me. Have you ever chosen your own peace over someone else's apology or lack of one? Maybe you declined an invitation that felt more like a performance than a welcome. Maybe you stopped answering calls that only came when they needed something. Maybe, one quiet day, you just decided you were done trying to be the bigger person and started being the real you instead. It doesn't have to be loud. It doesn't have to be dramatic. Sometimes healing looks like silence. Sometimes victory looks like not showing up. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to walk away without needing them to understand. If you've ever made that choice, if you've ever picked your peace instead of their guilt, leave one word in the comments that describes how it felt Words like free, enough, quiet, brave. Your word might seem simple, but it might be exactly what someone else needs to read tonight. Because out there, someone is watching in silence, wondering if they're the only one. Let's show them they're not.